The Cattle King. How Henry Miller built an empire out of $6. Imagine arriving in California with $6 in your pocket. No family fortune, no business connections, no fancy education, no inheritance, and definitely no billionaire parents waiting to rescue you. Just $6 and a dream. Now imagine that decades later, you own millions of acres of land, control hundreds of thousands of cattle, and become one of the wealthiest men in America. Sounds like the plot of a Hollywood movie, right? But this actually happened. His name was Henry Miller. And here's the funny part. Henry Miller didn't even come to California planning to become the Cattle King. He came looking for gold. But instead of digging for gold, he figured out how to make money from the people doing the digging. And that decision would change his life forever. This is the story of the man who arrived with $6 and built an empire, one cow, 1 acre, and one crazy business decision at a time. Chapter 1. He wasn't even Henry Miller. Before he became Henry Miller, he was Heinrich Kreiser. He was born in 1827 in Brackenheim, in what was then the German kingdom of Württemberg. His family worked with livestock, and young Heinrich was expected to follow the same path. But there was one problem. He didn't exactly love farm life. Imagine waking up every morning thinking, yep, another exciting day of feeding geese. Heinrich wanted something bigger. So at just 14 years old, he left home. He traveled through Europe, eventually reaching England. And while working there, he learned a skill that would later become extremely important: butchering. At 19, he crossed the Atlantic to New York. Then, in 1849, America was hit by one of the biggest opportunities of the century. Gold had been discovered in California. Suddenly, thousands of people were thinking the same thing. Forget everything. I'm going to California. Heinrich wanted to go too. There was just one tiny problem. He didn't have much money. So he got his hands on a second-hand steamer ticket. And the name printed on that ticket? Henry Miller. According to the popular story, Heinrich looked at the ticket and basically said, well, I guess I'm Henry now. And just like that, Heinrich Kreiser disappeared from the story. Henry Miller was born. Chapter 2. Everyone wanted gold. In 1850, Miller arrived in San Francisco. He had almost nothing. While thousands of men were rushing toward the gold fields with shovels, pans, and dreams of becoming millionaires, Miller did something very different. He picked up a butcher's cleaver. Now, you might be thinking, wait, everyone is chasing gold, and this guy is selling meat? Exactly. And that's what made him smart. Think about it. Gold miners needed food. Merchants needed food. Saloon owners needed food. Boarding houses needed food. Basically, everyone in a rapidly growing city needed to eat. Gold was valuable, but people still needed dinner. Miller opened a small butcher shop. Then he started doing something even smarter. Instead of simply buying cattle from middlemen, he went directly to ranchers. He traveled into the countryside. He looked at the cattle. He negotiated prices. He learned the ranching business. And slowly, he began to understand something. The real opportunity wasn't necessarily in finding valuable things. It was in supplying the people who were searching for them. While other people were gambling on where the next gold discovery would happen, Miller was building a business that made money whether they found gold or not. And that is one of the first lessons of his story. Don't always chase the opportunity everyone else is chasing. Sometimes the smarter move is to sell the shovel. Chapter 3. The competitor who became his partner. Miller wasn't the only successful butcher in San Francisco. Another German immigrant named Charles Lux was building his own business.
Lux was good at sales. He understood customers. He understood the meat business. Miller understood cattle, and he understood something even more important: supply. In 1857, Miller made a bold move. He went out and secured buying options on a huge portion of the cattle available north of the Tehachapi Mountains. In simple terms, he basically walked into the marketplace and said, "I'll take all the cows." His competitors suddenly had a problem. They needed cattle. But Miller had already locked up much of the supply, and one of those competitors was Charles Lux. Now Lux could have declared war. He could have tried to destroy Miller's business. Instead, he did something much smarter. He joined him. In 1858, Henry Miller and Charles Lux became partners, and the company Miller and Lux was born. Two butchers, two immigrants, two men who understood different sides of the same business. Together, they were about to build one of the largest cattle and meat packing operations in America. But the biggest part of their empire wasn't going to come from selling meat. It was going to come from something much less exciting. Something people usually don't think about when they hear the word empire. Land. Chapter 4. The Man Who Didn't Want to Sell. Here's where Henry Miller's strategy became almost obsessive. Miller believed in one simple rule: buy land, don't sell it. Other people would buy land, wait for prices to rise, and sell for a profit. Miller thought differently. If he could buy land cheaply, improve it, make it productive, and hold on to it, why sell? So Miller started buying, lots of it: swamps, dry land, desert, struggling properties, land that other people looked at and thought, why on earth would anybody buy this? Miller looked at the same land and thought, how can I make this useful? That difference in thinking made him extraordinarily wealthy, because Miller understood something many people overlook. An asset isn't always valuable because of what it is today. Sometimes its value comes from what you can turn it into. And Miller was especially interested in one thing: water. California had enormous amounts of land, but land without water could be almost worthless for agriculture. So Miller began investing heavily in irrigation. He built canals, he drained wetlands, he redirected water, he transformed dry and swampy land into productive farmland. And suddenly, land that looked worthless became incredibly valuable. This was the real secret. Miller wasn't simply buying land. He was buying potential. Chapter 5. The $6 man starts buying the West Miller's land holdings grew. A few thousand acres became tens of thousands. Tens of thousands became hundreds of thousands, and eventually, millions. By the 1880s, Miller and Lux held more than 3 million acres across parts of California, Nevada, and Oregon. Think about that for a second. 3 million acres. That's not a backyard. That's not a farm. That's practically its own kingdom. And Miller wasn't sitting in an office staring at spreadsheets all day. He was often out on horseback, checking cattle, inspecting land, looking at water, talking to workers, solving problems. The man who had arrived with $6 was now managing an empire so large that most people couldn't even comprehend its scale. But there was another battle waiting for him. And this one wasn't fought with cattle. It was fought in court. Water. Miller and Lux became involved in one of California's most important water rights battles, the case known as Lux versus Hagen. The dispute centered on who had the right to use water from the Kern River. And the outcome helped shape California water law for generations. Why? Because Miller understood something extremely important. If you control the land, but someone else controls the water, you don't necessarily control the future.
Chapter 6. the cattle king. By the time Henry Miller reached old age, his empire had become enormous. Miller and Lux owned roughly 1.4 million acres directly. Through leases and grazing arrangements, their influence stretched across an even larger territory. Their cattle operation was enormous. At its height, the company was associated with roughly 1 million head of cattle, 1 million cows. Imagine trying to count them. You'd probably retire somewhere around cow number 14,000. People began calling Henry Miller the Cattle King of California. And the title wasn't exactly an exaggeration. Remember the 19-year-old immigrant who arrived in America with almost nothing? The teenager who didn't want to spend his life feeding geese? The young man who came to California looking for gold? He had become one of the largest private landowners in American history. But perhaps the most remarkable part was this: he didn't become rich overnight. There was no magical lottery ticket, no gold nugget the size of a bowling ball, no one investment that suddenly made him a billionaire. He simply kept doing the same things over and over and over. Buy, improve, hold, reinvest, repeat.
Chapter 7. What Miller understood that others didn't. Henry Miller's story isn't really about cows. It's about thinking differently. When everyone else was chasing gold, he sold meat. When other businessmen focused on short-term profits, he bought land. When others saw worthless swamps, he saw farmland. When others saw dry land, he saw irrigation. And when others wanted to sell, he wanted to hold. That's an important lesson. Because sometimes the biggest opportunities don't look exciting at first. They look boring. They look difficult. They look like work. And honestly, that's probably why most people ignore them. Everyone wants the exciting opportunity. Nobody wants the boring one. Nobody says, I want to become a millionaire by patiently buying useful assets for 30 years. That doesn't sound nearly as exciting as, I found the next big investment. But Henry Miller's fortune wasn't built on excitement. It was built on consistency. Chapter 8. The Empire Outlives the Man. Henry Miller died in 1916 at roughly 89 years old. He had lived an extraordinary life. He had arrived in America as an immigrant. He had started with almost nothing. And he had built one of the largest agricultural and cattle empires in the country. His estate was worth tens of millions of dollars by contemporary estimates, with different sources giving different figures. But the exact number isn't really the point, because the numbers only tell you how much he accumulated. They don't explain how he did it. And that's where the story becomes interesting. He didn't start with wealth. He started with a skill. Then he turned that skill into a business. He used the business to buy assets. He improved those assets. Then he reinvested the profits. Then he did it again, and again, and again, for decades. That's how $6 became an empire. Final chapter, the real gold. So what can we actually learn from Henry Miller? Maybe it's this. You don't always need to find the biggest opportunity. Sometimes you need to find the opportunity that everyone else is ignoring. Miller came to California because he heard about gold, but he never found the fortune he was looking for in a mine. Instead, he found it in the people who needed to eat. Then he found it in cattle, then in land, then in water, and eventually, he built an empire. His greatest asset wasn't cattle, it wasn't land, it wasn't even money. It was his ability to look at something ordinary and see what it could become. A piece of worthless land, potential farmland, a butcher shop, a supply business, a second-hand ticket, a new identity, $6, a starting point. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. You don't need to start with millions. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need to know exactly where your life is going. Sometimes you just need to start with what you have. Henry Miller started with $6, and he turned it into an empire. So the next time you look at your own situation and think, I don't have enough to start, remember Henry Miller. Because $6 wasn't enough to buy an empire, but it was enough to begin. And sometimes that's all you need. Start small. Think long-term. Build what others overlook. And whatever you do, don't spend your whole life chasing gold. Sometimes, the real fortune is in selling the shovels. In truth, in tales, because sometimes the truth behind success is more powerful than the success itself.